Brad here from etrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the B&W Underbed Gooseneck Kit on a 2025 Chevy Silverado 1500. Having a gooseneck ball in your bed means that you're going to get the most towing capacity. Generally, you're going to get substantially higher numbers by putting the weight of your trailer above the axles rather than bumper towing. And while this is a half-ton truck, this is the smaller Duramax motor, so it's pretty capable. Generally, you don't see a whole lot of half-ton trucks pulling a gooseneck trailer, but there's definitely applications that it makes a lot of sense, and this might be one of them. The thing that I really like about the Underbed Gooseneck kits from B&W specifically is going to be the ball that they use. Now, a lot of them, the ball is going to stay latched in whether you have a tab at the top or a different way that it drops in, but B&W's is a little bit different. The square drop-in is going to make this unique to where it's not going to rotate. You can put it either way, but it's only going to drop in one way, and that's going to make sure that long-term it's going to be solid. It's not going to be moving on you, but also any water can still channel through the outside, and this locks in place with a handle that's on the side. And not only can you have it ready to tow, but when you're not using it, there's a handle on the bottom of the ball. You can simply drop this into place, latch it up, and you really pretty much get your entire bed back. And that's kind of the glory of a gooseneck hitch, is when you're not using it to tow trailers, you still have full access of your bed, including the safety chain loops. When you normally hook up, these are spring loaded, so you drop those down, and the corrugation that you'll see, there is very, very little height added. So really, once it's installed, if you're not using it, you have that full truck bed accessibility, and when you are ready to tow, you just simply drop this over, latch it in place, and hook everything up, and you're ready to go. Capacities on this Underbed Gooseneck Kit are really good. They're just as good as you'd get on a 3/4 ton, which is going to be 30,000 pounds for the hitch, and a vertical load capacity or a direct weight over it of 7,500 pounds. Now, tons of weight, that doesn't mean that this truck can do it. And that's where a lot of times people say, well, my hitch is rated for it, why can't I? And that's something with a half-ton truck, you may start to see some of that weight really causing some issues that you might not get with a 3/4 ton. The suspension, transmission, chassis, everything else has to be able to hold up to that weight. So check the vehicle's owner's manual, see what it's capable of towing, and then compare that with the number, but never try to match that if your vehicle can't. As far as the installation, this is a great kit. B&W makes really, really good underbed gooseneck kits, as well as really anything that they create. I'm really a huge fan of just fit, finish, the instructions, and this one's no different. It's kind of unique. A lot of it's going to be under the truck, and you're going to be opening up your wheel wells a little bit with those liners to get your cross members in place, and really it just kind of bolts up from there. Torquing it down can get a little bit tricky. But the scariest part is really going to be just cutting a 4-inch hole in your bed. After that's done, the rest just take your time, and it's not too bad to do. I might recommend an extra set of hands, especially if you're not working on a lift. I'm very lucky to be able to do that, but if you're doing this in your driveway or garage, some of these components can get really heavy, especially lifting that center section up, so having that extra set of hands might be worthwhile. If you watch this video and you still want this gooseneck kit, but maybe you don't want to do the installation, you don't have the place to do it, the tools, or heck, even the want to do it, I totally understand. And that's a good chance to reach out and find someone close to you by using our dealer locator. And you're going to find a shop close to you that can get this installed for you and get you on the road without you having to worry about the installation process. For you DIYers, stick around, I'll walk you through the installation. Let's get this installed on your truck. To begin our installation, we're going to make room for everything while we're working under there, and that's going to include dropping our spare tire and removing some of the heat shields. Now, we're going to be modifying one as well, but first things first, let's get the spare tire down and out of the way. To get our heat shield removed, it's going to be a 13mm socket, and it looks like we have 6 bolts, so we'll go through and get those removed. Heat shield that lives kind of along the bottom channels of our bed, we do need to trim it. If you look where your jounce bumpers are, or in our case airbags, we'll see that the cross member goes across, and there's the T25 Torx bits. We're going to cut along the edge, so just follow the front side of the cross member and get this nice and clean. make sure it's not protruding out too far. So I'll be using a pair of tin snips. You can use whatever cutting method that you have available, but I'll just follow along that line and we should be able to get everything cut out. Once we get this all the way cut through, we're going to head up front where there's going to be some Torx bits that we need to remove, because this portion we're going to take out completely. It will not go back up because our our Underbed Gooseneck Kit is going to live in this area. Now the hardware is going to be located up on the forward cross member, and it's going to be a T25. They're tricky to get to. It's underneath the bracket here, and then there's one over the fuel tank. So you may need to grab something small like I have here, which is just a 1/4-inch ratchet with our Torx bit in there. We'll go ahead and get this hardware taken out and remove our heat shield. I don't know if this is completely necessary. They mentioned that it's optional to lower the exhaust. Well, these have kind of these little spots, bezels around the exhaust tips, which makes it really not that much of a change once we pop them off. But with ours today, we have the Duramax. We're going to be able to separate it at this Y right here on our flange, and we'll just undo it, and that way we can drop this out of the way. It's really going to open it up. If you're doing this in your garage or on your driveway underneath the truck, this is going to help out quite a bit. So it's just going to be a 13mm socket. We'll get those nuts taken off, and then we'll get this exhaust pipe out of the way. So to continue to make space for everything, we see that we have a bracket with our brake lines, and these hard lines stick up slightly to where it's right above the frame. So we want to get this lowered down. It's going to be these two bolts, 13mm socket to get this accomplished. We'll loosen these up and move our bracket. Don't forget those spacers if they popped out, and we'll set this hardware aside. The next bracket that we're going to be taking down is going to be the one, if you look up, the cross member ahead of your differential. And there's a bunch of plugs on here, but if you reach up, you should be able to feel it feels like there's two nuts on there, and they're going to be a 10mm socket. You may need an extension here just to get to those. Once those nuts are off, just shimmy it up and down and move it towards the driver's side, and it should pop out just like that. On our passenger frame rail, we have this large wire loom that's running along the top, and most of our components are going to sit in this area, so we need to get this removed. A plastic trim tool works really well here. If not, you can use a flat head to just pry this up. And we're going to leave it loose. We're just going to kind of get this out of the way and pull it down for now, and we're going to keep it that way during the installation. On each of the wheel wells, we're going to be removing some Torx bits that attach the wheel well liner. It's going to be a T15 to get these removed, and there's this one, there's one on the back, and then I'm also going to take this one out, and our goal is to peel this back to really gain access where the frame has a gap between that and the bed. That's where we're going to be putting a lot of our components and feeding them in. So opening this up makes it a lot, well, it's kind of necessary, but it makes it a lot easier. As far as removing the entire liner, I don't recommend it. These are a pain to get back in. So as long as we have enough access to be able to put our hardware in, we'll be looking good. I'll just peel this back, and we can let this rest on the tire for now. The fun begins where we're going to cut the hole where our gooseneck receiver is going to pop through. And in order to do that, a 4-inch hole saw is what I'd recommend. If you have a 4 1/8, that might even be a better option to give you a little bit of wiggle room, but 4 inches puts it really clean. So this is going to be an important step. Make sure that it's done right, because you kind of get one shot here. So the best thing we're going to do is measure out exactly where it needs to go. You'll see this center corrugation, and just find the center one, and then we'll make our way back to 44 1/8. But something you're going to want to take in consideration if you have a spray-in bed liner, that tends to add a little bit to the edge of the bed, about 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to add that onto it. So that's going to make it 44 1/4. So I'll mark that out in the center of our spline, our corrugation. And then I'm going to drill a pilot hole. Now keep in mind, if you have a long bed version, the measurements are a little bit different, so definitely take a look at the instructions for that measurement, but it's going to be a similar process throughout. So at this point, with that pilot hole drilled, I'm going to grab my hole saw and I'm going to start cutting that hole in. Now, especially with the bed liner, a lot of times this will catch and it can throw you around. It can be a little bit hard on your wrist. So what I recommend doing is standing up and using your legs to kind of support your drill as you start to make that hole. And make sure that you go all the way through. So we'll get this drilled out. And with that cut out, I'm going to just take a file and run it along the edges, get any of those burrs knocked down. And since this is raw metal, we want to make sure it doesn't turn to rust and corrosion long term. So you could either use spray paint and a clear coat, black to match the, the in-bed liner, whatever you have. But make sure you just coat those edges. A paint marker also works, but this is a nice easy step to prevent that corrosion from occurring. Now grab your cross member. This is our front one, and it's going to be the angle iron one. And we want the holes facing towards the rear of the truck, and that way we can slide this in between the frame and the bed. Eventually, we're going to have this to where it's going to be vertical, but we don't have the space for that. So our goal now is to slide this through and get it to rest on the passenger frame. So it's a little bit tricky here, and it's pretty tight. So finding the spot to be able to do this is right at the front of the tire. I may have to hop underneath the truck to make sure that this goes onto that frame rail. So I'm going to hop under there now and guide it along. So once we have that slid across, now we can kind of rotate this to where those holes are vertical. And we're going to slide this forward a bit. That way we can make space for our center section. Grab one of our bolts and the rubber O-ring, and the O-ring is just a keeper, that way the bolt doesn't fall out, and that's going to go into the second hole from the driver's side. So it's right where that bump up is for the fuel tank. So I'll pass this through, and then I'm just going to thread this O-ring on, and that way it stays in place. Now we're going to get ready to put our center section up. So we're going to orientate this front cross member bracket. We're going to push the passenger side against the shock mount, and then the driver's side as far forward as we can. So that way it at least has some space here for us to be able to get that cross member in. I'm going to try to keep this vertical still. That should be good. Now grab your center section and you'll see this, and that's where the handle's going to go. That goes on the driver's side, so make sure you have it in the proper orientation. And we're going to guide this up to where this should go through where we made that hole. And it's pretty tight here, so we may have to kind of shift this around. But we're going to have this rest on the fuel tank. Now with that being said, there's some plastic components on the top of it that we want to make sure we're not damaging. So just kind of take your time. We're going to kind of roll this in place here. And this might be a two-person job. It's fairly heavy, but right about here should be enough. There's that plastic cap on the fuel tank. So at this point we have this resting, and I'm definitely going to recommend pulling that exhaust off. If you haven't already and you're struggling with it, it probably can be done without removing it, but this made it so much easier. So with this in place, it's just going to rest here for now. We're going to grab our rear cross member and get that threaded through the frame as well. And before we pass it in, something that I've learned just from previous installs on a lot of different underbed kits is going to be grabbing the hardware. In this threaded section, B&W does a really good job, but sometimes powder coat finish will get built up in there, and it makes it really difficult to thread bolts in by hand, which really comes into play when you're underneath the truck. Eventually you'll have to tighten them and it'd probably be okay, but to make things a little bit easier, what I like to do is grab one of our bolts and a 3/4 inch socket and just run this through all the way. It'll help clear that out and make it a little bit easier for us to thread them in. Now this cross member, we're going to have it vertical as we pass it in, but you'll see that it's slightly offset. Have the holes closer towards the top, and we're going to feed this in front of that rear cross member or that bed channeling, but in between that and the center section. And similar concept, we're going to pass this over to the passenger side frame rail. Those cross members in place, we need to get our center section raised up, and they talk about a lifting device. Ours, we use just kind of a fifth wheel base that we have in a ratchet strap, but you don't need to have that. What you can do is take 2 jack stands and align them pretty well in line with the hole and put a pipe, or if you have something, a long breaker bar or something, you could put it on there. That and a ratchet strap will do a fine job of raising this up, and it's going to draw it through that hole. So I'll get this attached and we'll start raising it up. And you should be able to hook it through that locking pin on the center section, and that'll be your mounting point to get this raised up. We're going to grab 8 bolts, 8 flat washers, 8 split washers, and 4 nuts. So as you probably know, the rear cross member is already threaded, so our combination of hardware is going to be the bolt, a split washer, and a flat washer. And move that center section, or move that cross member to where that hole's going to align with the threads. And we're not going to tighten any of this down, but there's going to be 4 holes from the center section. There's one here, there's one here, and then a mirror of that on the other side. And we're going to get 3 to 4 threads started on here. So again, you may need to kind of move this around as necessary to get it started. Now for the remaining bolts, I did say that you needed 8. You only need 7 because we already got that one in place with the O-ring. But what we'll do is feed the bolts from the backside in, and then we're going to finish them with a flat washer, split washer, and nut. So get all of those in place. Now I will say with that O-ring, it was a little bit hard for me to get the split washer on, so I did omit it on this one at least. But the remaining ones you should be able to get into place no problem. Again, just a few threads. We want to keep that to where it's still somewhat movable so we can get everything dialed in. Now back at our wheel well, we want to make sure that there's we have a little bit of a gap here, and that's going to be normal. But to fill that gap, if you don't have a gap, you don't have to worry about this, but ours definitely had it. And these are just going to be spacers to fill that gap. They slide here and then just back this in until it hits the frame. And on the back, or on our forward one, it's going to be a similar process here. So I'll just slide this under and push it in until we get it flush with the frame. Right below that center bed corrugation or that channel and above the where your jounce bumper or airbags would be, we're going to be feeding in hardware, and we're going to be using kind of a pull wire, fish wire technique here. So what we'll do first is we'll grab our spacer block and just feed this over the coiled end. You can then take your carriage bolt and just thread that onto that coiled section. And we're going to feed both of these into the frame rail. So just drop them in. And then we'll just hold on to it here. We're then going to take this oval spacer, and that's going to fill the void that we have in our frame. So that spacer block can kind of go whichever way. Once we put this on, that's going to center it up. So you can thread that all the way on. And that's going to just kind of rest like that. Now, if it does move around, that's totally fine, because once we start tightening everything down, it'll be good. But what we're going to need to do is make sure that bolt doesn't fall back in. So you can put a flathead screwdriver. We have a retainer that we're going to be threading on, and that's going to hold everything in place. But we want to make sure it doesn't drop in the interim. So what I recommend doing, if you don't want to go grab a flathead, another easy way to get this started is to take the pull wire, and I just wrap it around those threads and just pull it tight, and that's going to keep it at least in place. And now we'll grab our retainer and just thread this on. And once you have the retainer started, you can take either your flathead or that wire out, and then we'll just rotate this and tighten it down until it's sitting exactly where we need it to be. Now we're going to get our side brackets in, and they are going to be side specific. So the one with the sticker with the handle on it is going to be our driver's side, and it's going to be pretty much identical on both sides. So whatever we do here, we'll repeat on the other. And what I'm going to do is try to get our holes in our cross members started first. This is kind of a tight fit. I've been kind of messing with it for a little, and I don't know if there's a perfect way to do this, but it's why we leave it loose, because as we start to tighten it, it should all draw together. So what I'll do is feed this in. And it should kind of rest on that bolt that we passed in the frame. And I'm going to get the threaded portion started. So it's just a bolt and a split washer. So I'll get that threaded here onto the rear cross member first. And this is why it's a little tricky here. It's very tight, and they say to use the U-bolts, but we're going to wait to do that. I think this is going to be the easiest way that I've found to get this started. So first we'll get this one threaded in. And then on this back one, I noticed that where we originally had that Torx bit that threads in on this spot here, it's rubbing against our cross member. And I'm thinking once we tighten everything down, that should kind of fix itself as we go along. But what we'll do here is we're going to put a bolt through. And we have a split washer and a nut. And you can see it's still bowing outwards, so that's where I ran into some of those issues of it just being really tight up here mostly. So with that in place, we can push this in, and it's actually drawn in better than I expected on this side. But where we had that stud where we passed it through, we'll put a flat washer, a split washer, and then a nut. And this is going to start to tie everything together. Our next step is going to be to hop under with our U-bolts, and those are going to pass into our bracket. So we'll see the hole here, and then there's one down here. They're going to kind of go in oblong a little bit. It's going to be at an angle, so don't be surprised if that's the case for you. So I'll hop under, I'll get those passed through here, and then we're going to get those bolted up. Now with the U-bolts, we do need to be careful. On our driver's side, we have those hard brake lines. So we'll just slide this U-bolt up and make sure that it's not going to be pinching the lines, obviously. And we'll get this fed in. And you may need to shift the bracket around to get these holes to align. And we got that passed through. So I'll go back out and get our hardware on, but while we're here, I'll point out on our passenger side, we have that large wire loom. Just make sure that that's not crushing that as well. With everything loosely in place, we need to double check to make sure everything's perfectly squared up. And the best way to do that is where our cross member is, we're going to measure that against our bed channel. So this one's, let's call it maybe 3/8 of an inch. So what I'll do is I'll hop on the other side and make sure this is even. And what I've found is I wouldn't use a pry bar on here. When you go underneath, it's actually a little bit easier to make sure that it's all squared up. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Instead of trying to get side to side and not really have a great place to pry, the best thing that I've done, I think, to make it easier, I mentioned ours is about 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just using a 3/8 extension. And this barely pops in on this side. And it's about the same here. But if I need to, what I do to shift it would just take a pry bar and just press it on here. And that way you're not just, you have a little bit more of a rigidity or a structure to be able to pry on. But the main thing is making sure that this is going to be cohesive across the entire way, and that's going to make sure that our center section is going to be straight and not slightly crooked. So go through, make sure that all of yours is even. So again, you may not have 3/8 like I do as far as your gap, but find something to reference, tape measure, whatever, and then adjust it accordingly. So now we need to start tightening down our bolts that we have in our center section, all 8 of them, and we want to get those snugged up, and then we're going to come back with a torque wrench. So at this point, 3/4 inch socket, we'll just kind of buzz all these down. And I would recommend actually doing the threaded portion first and getting those snug, and then making sure that it didn't shift our bracket, I think is going to be the best way. And then that back side, more than likely we're going to need a wrench on one side to get it all snugged down. But go through, get them all tightened up, make sure that this is still staying exactly where it needs to be. I have them all snugged down. I'm going to come back with my torque wrench. Torque settings are going to be found in the instruction manual, and we'll go through all of those and get them torqued down properly. With our center section torqued down properly, now we're going to start snugging up the side plates, and then we'll come back and torque them down. There is going to be an order that we want to follow. First thing we're going to do is the bolts that are horizontal that go into our cross members. Then we'll do the bolt that we pass through with the fish wire, and then we're going to do our U-bolts. So first thing, snug everything down, and then take a look at the instruction manual for those torque settings, go through and get everything torqued down properly. Now it is tight here, so it's going to be a little bit difficult. So you might be able to get away with a swivel. Even a ratcheting wrench on here is going to be tricky. So this might be a pretty tedious step, but we'll get this all tightened and torqued down. Now we need to get an access hole if you have wheel well liners for our handle, and on our driver's side it's going to fit through this small section. And so the best way to get that hole made is going to be measuring from this hole to this section. It's going to be 8 3/4. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of hold this in place, and you can see roughly where the edge of the frame is. So we're going to go right below that. So in ours it's going to be a little bit higher than this. So I'll hold this in place, and then I'll measure out 8 3/4 from the center of that hole. And I'm going to make a mark right here. And they say you can use a hole saw. Basically, you just need to make a 1-inch hole, give or take. So you can use a utility knife. You can kind of use whatever you have handy, but I'll go ahead and get this hole made. And what you can do is you can just make an X for now, and then we can put that through here, and then you're going to need a little bit of mobility. So if you want, you can cut out sections here. You can always cut it out a little bit later if you're really particular about it. But main thing is it's got room to move, because in order to lock and unlock, it will have to move around a little bit. So I'm just going to follow my X pattern, make that circle, and that way we have that all done. So this is what I came up with, and at this point we're going to want to feed our handle through. We are going to have to go up and get our lifting device taken down so we can extend the handle to get this installed, but we'll just feed this in for now so it's underneath there, ready to go. Our handle should be facing towards the back of the truck, but guide it through this section here. And what we'll do is we're going to pull this back and slot it into its locking spot. So right there. And be careful, because it can kind of, it's obviously spring loaded, so we don't want it to latch back. So I recommend kind of holding it as we get this in place. So this is going to sit right here. I'm going to take my carriage bolt that's included in the kit, thread that on, and then we have a flange nut. We'll get that threaded on. It's going to be a 1/2 inch socket to get this tightened down. You don't have to get crazy here, but we'll snug it. And let's pretty tight here for a socket, so you may need to swap over to a wrench, but once we get this snug down, we'll be looking pretty good. Test to make sure that it's working properly, it's not getting hung up or anything like that. And as you probably noticed while attaching it, this is the locking position, and it's just kind of a twist down. So if you twist it back or towards the front and let it go, that's how you engage it. And then when you're ready to disengage and pull the ball out, you should be able to pull that, twist it slightly down, and it should hold in place. So now's a good time to really see exactly how the handle is going to sit. So, you know, if you wanted to cut this around the handle so your hand doesn't have to rub against this you know, underbout or wheel well liner here, you can absolutely do that, and I think that's what I'm going to do. Just kind of follow this around so you can get your hands on it a little bit easier, but make sure that it's actuating smoothly, and we'll be looking good. To get our spring-loaded safety chain attachments in place, we'll find that we have 2 holes here, and then there's going to be 2 holes here. We're going to want to drill through there, and you can choose to use a pilot bit first, or you can run a 1/2 inch up there. It's kind of up to you. But I'm going to get my pilot started at least, and then I'll grab my 1/2 inch and then we'll enlarge it. Now it does get pretty tight, and a lot of times your 1/2 inch drill bits, you're going to need a fairly decent sized chuck, one that my right angle drill is not going to be able to do. So as long as you can get a pilot hole made in those holes, you can drill it out from the top using a 1/2 inch, or you can even use a step bit, whatever tickles your fancy. But we're going to hop up there and get those enlarged. Now while we're up here, I recommend having those U-bolts ready to test to make sure that they slide in nice and easy. And also I would recommend having a vacuum. If you haven't already gotten the metal shavings from our 4-inch hole, we're going to make some more here. So we do want to get that clean, as well as our paint marker to get those holes with the fresh metal there all cleaned up. So we'll get these enlarged. And you'll see here that, you know, our threads might get a little bit tight, and really that's okay, but once you get it passed in, you want to make sure that it can raise up. It'll be spring loaded to kind of hold it down, but you want to make sure that it easily moves. That way it's not a fight every time you have to hook up your safety chain. So if you need to, you can kind of waller it back and forth to enlarge that, just to make sure that it passes in well. And that's what we're looking for. You should be able to just raise that up and drop it down, and it's not getting caught. So we're looking good there. I'm going to get my other ones drilled out. We'll clean all this up with the vacuum, get some paint on here, and then drop these in, and then we'll get the springs attached on the bottom. We're going to be putting the springs in place, so they're conical. You're going to have that wider part towards the top, and we'll have our nuts ready. Now, what I recommend doing here is push up that spring quite a bit and thread these on. And the main thing is when you tighten, keep this out of the way, because there's been many times where if you start tightening it, that can coil onto it and really start to damage that spring. And when you tighten it, 3/4 socket's going to accomplish this. We're going to just snug this down until the bottom of the nut is flush with the stud. So I even went a little bit too much there, but that should be fine. And then we'll just continue doing the exact same thing for the remaining portions. We got our springs in. You can drop your ball in if you're going to be towing right away, or you can flip it over and have it ready for when you are ready to tow. But all that's left to do is get our brackets put back in place, so make sure both of those are in, our spare tire, our heat shield, our exhaust. But other than that, as far as the installation goes, we're done. So hopefully this helped you get your Underbed Gooseneck Kit installed. Once you have this installed, please send me some pictures or let me know some comments if this video helped you or not, and also how are you using this. With that being said, hopefully this video helped you get this installed on your truck, and that was a look and installation of the B&W Underbed Gooseneck Kit on a 2025 Chevy Silverado 1500. My name's Brad, thanks for watching.